Ever feel like you're just a faint outline in your own house? I'm Claire, 39, a wife and stepmom, drifting like a ghost sometimes. I thought I'd grown used to the quiet until David, my husband's boy, came back to live with us. At first, we shared hushed dinners, wrapped in silence, but bit by bit, I felt what it's like to be seen again. There was this soft warmth in being noticed, not as a role, but as me, Claire, a real person. It wasn't about love in a romantic way, just the quiet relief of existing in someone's eyes after years of fading away. Ever felt that spark of being truly seen? Stick with me to the end and let me know if you've ever crossed a delicate line like that. I'm Claire, 39, married, a stepmom, and sometimes just a shadow slipping through my own home. When I married Mark, it felt like stepping into a cozy dream, morning tea, warm grins, and vows to grow old side by side. But over time, those promises, left untended, slipped away without a whisper. Mark's still a good guy, kind, no glaring flaws. Yet somehow, he's become a stranger living under the same roof. We don't fight, not out of deep love, but because we've run out of words. Dinners turned silent, our talk stuck to schedules and work. At night, I'd lie with my back to Mark, his steady breathing beside me, feeling smaller, more invisible, with every passing day. David, Mark's son, is a whole different chapter. I met him when he was 6, a skinny kid with eyes that always seemed to ask if he belonged. I tried so hard to be someone he could lean on, making his breakfast, driving him to school, sitting by his side through fevers and tests. But being the woman who came into his life too late was always a careful dance. David never pushed me away, but he never called me mom either. I don't hold it against him, honest. I just hoped one day when I asked, "You okay?" he'd open up, not just to be polite, but because he wanted to share a piece of himself. Lately, Mark's been busier than ever, business trips stretching days, late nights at the office. David just hit 16, taller than me now, moving with the quiet confidence of a young man ready to fly. I started feeling like a guest in my own house, tidying up, cooking dinners, fading out of every meaningful talk. Then one morning, Mark said, "I'm off for a few days on business. Can you look after David?" I nodded, not just to agree, but because I wanted to. Maybe this was my chance to finally connect with the boy I'd never fully reached. I suggested we head to the old seaside house, a place Mark bought years ago for a change of scenery but left mostly forgotten. It's a quiet spot, just waves, sand, and a flicker of hope. I didn't know what awaited me there, but I felt if I didn't try now, I might lose something more precious than being called stepmom. The trip started on a still afternoon. The car held 2 people tied by a bond we hadn't yet named. David sat beside me, earphones loosely in, staring out the window as trees blurred past. I kept quiet, not for lack of words, but to protect the fragile peace that felt safe for us both. The seaside house came into view as the sun dipped low, painting the worn roof tiles with a soft orange glow. The place felt like it was stuck in time, faded white walls, the smell of old wood mixed with ocean air, and that oak dining table with its little corner crack Mark always swore he'd fix but never did. I stepped inside, like waking a memory that had been asleep for years. David trailed behind, his eyes quietly scanning the place. I couldn't read his thoughts, but I noticed his gaze linger on the crooked landscape painting in the living room, like it held some secret. A moment later, he turned to me, his voice soft, "How long are we staying here?" I answered, "As long as you feel like staying." It was a vague reply, sure, but it was honest. We had a simple dinner, noodles, the kind I used to make when he was little. We didn't talk much, but something felt different, lighter. That cold distance we'd grown used to? It was fading. Just 2 people relearning how to share a table, eat, and breathe together. After dinner, I cleared the plates. David started to help but stopped, leaning against the kitchen doorway. His voice came, low and gentle, like the sea breeze outside. "Do you come here by yourself a lot?" I paused, caught off guard. "Nah, it's been ages since I've been back." This place was supposed to be special, but life just swept it away. David nodded, just a small tilt of his head, and walked slowly toward the backyard. Watching his tall frame, I saw a quiet loneliness in him. I wondered if he, too, was searching for something, a sense of belonging, a connection that didn't need permission. That evening, I sat on the porch, a light scarf around my shoulders, cradling a warm mug of tea. The night sea was calm, its salty breath mingling with the steady waves, like memories whispering. David came out, a jacket slung over his arm, holding a cold soda. He didn't sit next to me but picked the chair across the small round table. Still, his presence, even without words, eased something in me. After a long quiet, he spoke softly. I remember the first time we came here. I was little. Dad was at a meeting, Mom didn't come. I ran off to the beach and got lost. You found me. I looked at him, surprised. I didn't think you'd remember that. I do, he said. I remember how you held me, didn't say a word, just brushed the sand off my face and held my hands so tight. I gave a sad smile. I was scared if I let go, you'd slip away. David met my eyes, and for once, they weren't guarded. I saw something new, understanding, maybe a hint of regret, like he was reaching for something we'd both lost long ago. We sat there, quiet for a while, no need for more words. The wind brushed the porch roof, waves rolled in, and deep inside, something in me started to soften, not from weakness, but because, for the first time in ages, I didn't feel invisible. The next morning, soft sunlight slipped through the thin curtains, painting the ceiling with a warm golden glow. I woke to a rare stillness, no alarms, no city noise, just the gentle hum of far-off waves and the occasional cry of seabirds gliding by the old roof. I headed to the kitchen and spotted a note on the table, went for a beach run. Coffee's on. I smiled, David's handwriting, neat and steady, just like the calm boy he's always been. I poured a cup of coffee and stood by the window, watching the sea sparkle like it was sprinkled with light. Each wave was a soft ripple, like a quiet thought left unsaid. I didn't bring a plan for this trip, no checklist. I just wanted to feel alive again. And somehow, David seemed to be moving to the same quiet beat. When David came back, his shirt damp with sweat and sand dusting the hems of his jeans, he stepped into the kitchen and grinned, catching me still clutching my coffee mug, standing like I hadn't budged an inch. Didn't want to wake you, you were out cold, he said. It's been ages since I slept without dreams chasing me, I answered, turning to gaze at the sunlit courtyard to hide the flicker in my eyes. David ambled over to the fridge, grabbing a bottle of water. I was thinking of sprucing up the backyard later, those wooden chairs are barely holding together. I'll pitch in, I offered. Nah, you're on vacation, Mom. Just kick back, he said. I didn't say anything, but watching him pour water into a glass, his hand trembling just a bit from the run, made me pause. It hit me, he wasn't the little boy I used to look after anymore, he was a young man, quietly picking up the small burdens I'd carried for years. We spent the morning fixing up the yard, replacing splintered planks, wiping down the stone bench, and taming the wild Castina hedge. The work wasn't tough, but it felt like one of the richest mornings I'd had in forever, not because it was anything grand, but because we were side by side, no hurry, no need to run from the moment. As I stacked some folding chairs under the awning, David's voice called out. I turned, and his eyes, maybe from the sunlight or something deeper, looked suddenly serious. You're smiling more today than you were yesterday, he said. I froze, caught off guard by how sharply he'd noticed. He went on, his voice softer, I used to think grown-ups handled sadness better, but I'm starting to see adults can be lonelier than kids sometimes. I held his gaze for a long moment, not smiling, not looking away. His gentle words cracked open something I didn't even know I'd locked away. Thank you, I whispered, for really seeing me. We sat under the awning, each with a cold drink, quietly watching the sea shimmer in the distance. No words were needed, but the gap between us, once heavy with years, roles, and unspoken rules, was melting into something real. That afternoon, we strolled to the beach, the sea smooth as glass, waves just kissing our feet, not enough to wet my dress. David walked beside me, keeping a careful distance, but every now and then, his eyes studied me, like he was wrestling with how to name the mix of closeness and change between us. I didn't press him. Some feelings, if you speak them too soon, slip away like sand. In the soft evening light, I started to realize something. Sometimes it's not what you've lost that shakes you, but what's quietly taken root, growing beyond your plans. That evening, after a simple dinner of grilled fish and steamed veggies, we didn't rush to tidy up. David dragged chairs to the yard and flicked on the string lights we'd hung during a trip 2 years back. The warm yellow bulbs glowed across the eaves, lighting up the stone patio where I used to curl up with a book in younger days. I grabbed a mug of tea, stepped outside, and settled across from David. The air felt soft, like a quiet song filling the silence without needing words. "Do you remember the first time you came to our house?" David asked out of the blue. I let out a small chuckle. "How could I forget? You flat out refused to call me Mom back then." He nodded, sipping his water. "I think I was scared you'd try to take my real mom's place. But you never pushed, just stayed there." I looked at him. "I never wanted to replace anybody. I just wanted you to know I'd be there if you needed me." "I know," he said softly. "And maybe because you didn't force it, I started letting you in." His words felt like a pebble dropping into a deep well of feelings, ready to spill over. I didn't answer, just met his eyes, so different from the little boy I used to guide through holiday chaos. Now they held the steady gaze of a young man, gentle, deep, maybe a bit lost in what he was starting to feel. In that moment, I felt a shift, not sudden, not tied to one thing, but born from a slow, quiet unfolding. We'd lived so long in fixed roles that when something new started to grow beyond them, it was hard to pin down. David got up, grabbed a light blanket, handed it to me, and sat back down, a little closer this time. "Can I ask you something personal?" he said. I hesitated, then nodded. "Are you happy?" he asked, his voice soft but steady, eyes locked on mine. I gripped my teacup tighter, facing a question I'd dodged for years. "I think I was happy once," I said. Then came long years of just trying to do things right. Lately, I've been wondering what real happiness even feels like. David didn't speak, but the small nod he gave made me feel heard. "Maybe," I went on, "happiness isn't some big thing. Maybe it's just someone truly seeing you." He turned to me. "What do you see now?" My voice dropped to a whisper. "I see a young man across from me, and for the first time I see myself, not as a wife or stepmom, but as a woman learning to live true." We sat in silence, like any sound might break the delicate quiet. We didn't touch, but inside, something stirred, reaching back to forgotten wishes, to be cared for, not out of duty, to be seen, not because of a title. That night, sleep didn't come easy. I lay in my room, the wind whispering outside, my heart caught between heavy and light. A quiet understanding was growing between us, respectful, rooted in shared years, but strong enough to make going back to the old ways impossible. Tomorrow, I thought, we'll head to the local market, pick out some fruit, maybe some dried lavender, and who knows, maybe start a new conversation, one where we keep learning who we are, not just as stepmom and stepson, but as people. Maybe that's how two souls crossing paths learn not to pass each other by. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. Pale golden light spilled through the window, spreading softly across the cool wooden floor, like a gentle nudge that a new day was here. I slipped on a light cardigan and went downstairs, where the house was unusually still. David wasn't up yet. I started boiling water for coffee, my hand still carrying the weight of last night's talk. I couldn't deny my heart was beating differently, but what did that mean? I wasn't ready to name it. The soft creak of footsteps on the wooden stairs startled me. David shuffled into the kitchen, hair a bit messy, a trace of sleep still in his eyes. He gave a small smile, one that made me look away, unsure how to meet it. "Morning, Mom," he said, like he was reminding himself of the space we're supposed to keep. I nodded, sliding a coffee mug toward him. "Sleep okay?" He sat across from me, a little restless, maybe wrestling with too many thoughts. I knew that feeling. Uncertainty can be less scary than facing something clear you're not ready to name. After breakfast, we hopped in the car for a quick 15-minute drive to a little weekend market near the house. We didn't talk much on the way, but the quiet between us felt easy now, not strained. I flipped on the radio, and a smooth jazz melody drifted through, soothing the tangle of thoughts swirling in my head. At the market, David lingered at a stall piled with old books, while I wandered to a stand selling dried flowers. I picked out a modest bunch of lavender, and the vendor wrapped it in crinkled newspaper, passing it to me with a soft wish. "Folks often pick lavender when they're holding on to something they can't quite say," she said. I gave a small nod, thinking maybe she had a point. When we got back, the sky had turned slate gray, a cool breeze carrying the scent of rain on its way. In the kitchen, we teamed up to make lunch, a simple task that today felt layered with meaning we didn't need to name. David chopped carrots while I stirred the broth, and though we didn't speak, his presence filled every breath I took. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if, in another life, another role, we could have given this connection a name without holding it back. "Claire," David said suddenly, using my name instead of Mom. I looked up, caught off guard by how grown-up he sounded. "I'm sorry if I made you uneasy last night," he said. I held his gaze for a long moment before shaking my head gently. "It wasn't unease," I said. "It's just hard to believe you're not the little boy I used to walk to kindergarten anymore." He laughed softly. "I didn't think you'd remember that so clearly." "Some memories we carry in our hearts to remind us who we were," I said. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. We ate lunch, cleaned the dishes, and settled on the porch to watch the rain fall. Neither of us brought up last night, but when David said my name, something had shifted. That night, alone in my room, I held the worn poetry book David had picked up at the market. On the first page, in faint pencil, he'd written, "Sometimes people don't love the wrong person, just at the wrong time." I shut the book, my hand trembling a little. Some truths can't be spoken out loud, they're meant to be felt, not acted on. I walked to the window and peered down at David in the yard, shielding the little dog from the rain with an umbrella. The moment felt both comfortingly familiar and strangely distant, like a memory half forgotten. I silently promised myself that if I could cradle this feeling in my heart without causing anyone pain, I would, like lavender tucked in old newspaper, its scent lingering even if never shown off. I don't remember when I slipped into sleep, only that when I opened my eyes, gentle morning light flooded the room, and on the nightstand rested a cold mug of tea beside the poetry book, still open to David's handwritten note. I sat up, slipped on a cozy sweater, and padded quietly to the kitchen. David wasn't there, but the kitchen gleamed, neat and bright, as if arranged to greet me with a peaceful start to the day. A small note lay under my glass on the table, "Went for a walk. No need to wait. Thank you for not pulling away." I ran my fingers over the words, unhurried, feeling their quiet gratitude. In those simple lines, I saw a new kind of maturity in David, one I hadn't fully noticed before. He was learning to hold his emotions close and release them with grace. As I stood there, clutching the note, I felt a soft warmth settle in my chest, like the first sip of tea on a chilly morning. The house was still, save for the faint hum of the fridge and the distant patter of leftover rain on the roof. I stepped to the sink, gazing out at the garden where the grass glistened, heavy with dew. It struck me how much this trip had changed us, not in loud, dramatic ways, but in the quiet spaces between words, where understanding grows. I wondered if David felt it too, this delicate shift, like a tide pulling back to reveal something new beneath the surface. I poured a fresh cup of tea and carried it to the porch, settling into the rocking chair where I'd spent so many mornings lost in thought. The air was cool, carrying the clean scent of rain-soaked earth, and I let myself sit with the moment, not rushing to fill it with plans or questions. Maybe that's what this trip was teaching me, to let some things simply be, to trust that not every feeling needs a name to matter. I poured fresh tea, opened the patio door, and settled into the rocking chair where I love to read. The morning air was crisp, everything sharper, more real. In the garden below, wild daisies still sparkled with yesterday's rain, their heads dipping slightly, like they, too, knew how to be still. Around noon, I heard David's familiar steps on the wooden stairs. He came back, dew clinging to his coat, his eyes meeting mine, not avoiding, not pushing past what was right. I smiled softly, like welcoming an old friend. wander far? I asked. Just far enough to sort out my thoughts, he said. We ate lunch, chatting about simple things, David's plans for the next semester, new pastry recipes I wanted to try, and a few old memories of his dad I'd kept locked in my heart for years. We didn't touch on the feelings that had veered off track. There was no need. The silence between us wasn't tense anymore, it was a new kind of understanding, close enough to feel warm, distant enough to feel safe. Before David packed up to return to school, I slipped into his room. On his desk, the lavender bouquet from the market rested beside a small frame holding a photo of us in the park when he was 7. That day came back vividly. He'd tumbled off his bike, and I'd held him tight, brushing away dirt and tears from his cheeks. I nudged the frame slightly, not because it was crooked, but because it felt like a moment worth cherishing. David stood quietly in the doorway, watching me. If you store dried lavender right, its fragrance lasts, I said, my gaze lingering on the photo. He gave a soft smile. And it doesn't need to be the centerpiece to hold meaning. We shared a long embrace before he climbed into the car, long enough to mend something, long enough to know we'd crossed a hazy boundary without losing what truly mattered. Respect, companionship, and a quiet care that redrew the lines between us. After his car disappeared down the road, I stepped back inside, opened the wide window, and let the faint scent of lavender float in with the breeze. It hit me then, some emotions arrive at the wrong moment, but if you face them clearly, understand them, and set them in their proper place, they weave into your growth. I lingered by the window, watching the sea in the distance, its waves rolling gently under a sky still soft from the morning's light. The house felt quieter now, not empty, but like it was holding its breath, waiting for me to decide what came next. I wandered to the kitchen, where the note David left still sat under my glass, its words simple but heavy with meaning. I tucked it into my pocket, not as a keepsake to cling to, but as a reminder of the understanding we'd found. Sitting at the oak table with its familiar crack in the corner, I sipped a fresh cup of tea, letting my thoughts drift. This trip hadn't just been about reconnecting with David, it was about rediscovering pieces of myself I'd let slip away. I thought about the years I'd spent fading into the background, trying to be the wife and stepmom I thought I should be. But here, in this old seaside house, I was starting to feel like Clare again, not a role, but a woman with her own heart, her own strength. I stepped outside to the porch, the rocking chair creaking softly as I settled in. The garden below was alive with the last of the season's wildflowers, their colors muted but stubborn against the fading summer. I wondered what David was thinking as he drove away, whether he carried the same quiet shift in his heart that I did. We'd come so close to something unnamed, something that could have pulled us off course, but instead, we chose to step back, to honor the bond we'd built over years. It wasn't about denying what we felt, it was about choosing what was right, what would let us both keep growing. I smiled to myself, the kind of smile that comes from knowing you've found something worth keeping, even if it's just a moment of clarity. As the breeze carried the scent of lavender and salt air, I felt a lightness I hadn't known in years, not the weight of a role, but the freedom of being seen, and seeing myself, for who I truly am. I learned that love isn't always about clinging tight. Sometimes it's choosing dignity and distance, honoring what matters most. My story, Claire's story, isn't a sweeping love song. It's a quiet solo, where empathy's high notes weave with pauses of restraint, giving room for growth. I used to think the loneliness in my marriage was the worst pain. But I came to see it wasn't just the absence of a man, it was feeling like I'd stopped being a living, breathing person. When David came into my life, like a warm breeze slipping through a crack I hadn't noticed, I was shocked to realize I'd faded from my own story without knowing it. We stood at a fragile crossroads, choosing respect over drifting apart. We didn't ignore what happened, but we didn't let it define us or the sacred bond we share. I learned love doesn't mean owning someone. Sometimes it's meeting their eyes, seeing their loneliness, and stepping back gently to preserve something more beautiful than a fleeting spark. David, the boy I once watched over, showed me that every emotion, no matter how lovely or poorly timed, deserves to be acknowledged, not chased, but understood, so we can grow together while staying within safe, respectful lines. This story doesn't wrap up like a fairy tale, and it doesn't need to. What I discovered wasn't a new romance but a spark that brought me back to life, a woman who realizes she can still feel deeply, make choices, and step forward with courage, holding her value close. That's what I treasure most. And maybe, for both of us, that's more than enough.